Ohio State has won a national championship, and it is a tough, tough time for the Cant cabal. Those of you who have been around the show for a long time, you understand what the Cant cabal is all about. I've always had a beef with these people. It's not just with Ryan Day, but specific to this game, it was about Ryan Day. The Cant cabal, the cannot cabal, if you want to remove the contraction, is the group of people who just wander the internet feral style, and they yell that something can't happen or someone can't do something. And lately, since they couldn't say it about Kirby Smart anymore, they had started to attack Ryan Day. Ryan Day can't win the big one. Ryan Day can't win a national championship. Now, that was always foolishness. And as we've said on the show many times, repeating the words of Meemaw from years ago, there is a difference between cannot and have not. And Ryan Day merely had not won a national championship until, lick the index finger, last night. 34-23 is the final. We were on hand for this one, just as I was on hand for the Tennessee slaughter, just as I was on hand for the Oregon splattering. And this one last night started out as a splattering. It looks much more respectable on the final scoreboard, but Ohio State controlled this game for vast majorities of Monday evening there in Atlanta. What a crowd, by the way. Oh, man, those tickets, $2,000+ a piece. You guys represented both sides. Hats off, big salute, both of you represented. The real story here, and I'll talk about the game in a second. I got a ton to say about the game, but the real story from a much broader perspective, much more zoomed out perspective with Ohio State is, of course, the contrast between the lowest of lows that you experienced against Michigan and then the highest of highs that you experience winning a national championship 51 days later, I went and counted, against Notre Dame, and how it's crazy that with the new format of college football, that stuff can all happen within the same season. Used to not be that way. That's not the real story, though, to me. That's the obvious one. But the subplot here is the history, the long and storied history between Ohio State coaches, big-time moments in championship games, and golf carts. And it wasn't that long ago, 2013, when you had a shot against Michigan State in the Big Ten title game. All you had to do is beat them, and you're going to punch your ticket to the college football playoff and or maybe even a championship game. And you lose 34-24, almost the same score as last night, but inverted. And Sad Urban Pizza ends up being one of the quintessential college football memes of the 2000 teens. And that was just a situation where you've got a guy who makes millions upon millions of dollars, but he is so distraught that he sits there alone with his thoughts and a personalized Papa John's pizza, probably made hours before he eats it. And as you can clearly see, Urban's down bad, and he's on a cart. And who would have known? After Urban ate the sad pizza on the golf cart in 2013, you fast forward 11 or 12 years, Ryan Day wins a national title, finds himself in a golf cart last night, and boom, attempted vehicular homicide right there in the bowels of Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Now this is courtesy of PC Greenfield. I was standing right there when this happened. I could not believe it. Golf cart going, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 yards through the tunnel to get from one place to the other, and they slammed that thing into a wall. If you're listening on podcast, you've probably seen it already, but if you haven't seen it, just go take a look. My point is, much like you could not tell what the ending was going to be from watching the Michigan outcome, because 51 days later they win a title, just because an Ohio State coach is down bad on a golf cart in the bowels of a building after a championship game does not always mean it's gone poorly. And that I'm happy to see, because that is a page of history that Ryan Day, I would assume, was happy to rewrite last night. This game tracked for Ohio State. So what I mean by that is it largely went the way that they needed it to, but not immediately. So I assume most of you watched the game, maybe in person, maybe on TV, but most of you watched it. What did you think after Notre Dame's opening drive? It was an uh-oh moment for me. I will be very clear, because I had a lot riding on this game. Not money. I didn't bet anything on it. But please understand, I picked Notre Dame to lose this game. If they had won, I'd be done. My reputation would be in tatters. I would not be able to get it back. I could never show my face in South Bend. And they go on an 18-play, 75-yard drive, 9 minutes, 45 seconds off the clock, which just goes to show you, you do not always know how a game's going to go by the opening drive. I learned this lesson in Ohio State games the hard way, because I learned to keep my mouth shut when Indiana had a nice little opening drive against Ohio State. And I said some things that I deleted on the internet, but the internet remembers. The internet is forever. And I paid the price. So I certainly did not run my mouth last night when Notre Dame went on that 18-play drive. It was the longest drive in terms of plays in college football playoff title game history. It was the longest drive in terms of time in college football playoff title game history. So Matt Fortuna puts out a tweet, and this is really, really good, actually, to give you some context for what was about to happen. So Notre Dame goes on the 18-play drive. Notre Dame melts 2/3 of the first quarter clock. It's up 7-0, looks great. They're taking control of the game. Matt Fortuna tweeted this out. Notre Dame gave up 3 touchdown drives of 75-plus yards in a game just once all season. This is what came next. The Irish then gave up 4 such touchdown drives to Ohio State, all 4 of the Buckeyes' drives. That right there was probably tweeted around halftime. So when I say this thing tracked for Ohio State, I mean they didn't flinch. If anything, I think that opening drive by Notre Dame shook them a little bit and got them in gear. They watched Notre Dame go 18 plays, 75 yards. They go 11 plays, 75 yards in 6 minutes and change, touchdown. Next drive, 10 plays, 76 yards, 6 minutes and change, touchdown. Next drive, 12 plays, 80 yards, 426, touchdown. Next drive, 5 plays, 75 yards, 2 minutes and change, touchdown. Of course, that's the answer of the year for Ohio State. And unlike the Michigan game, where it started off a little shaky and then they felt like they were playing not to lose, they just went for the throat. And they didn't do it by forcing the ball to Jeremiah Smith. They didn't even do it by trying to force their will. They did it by taking what Notre Dame gave them, which was really a beautiful thing at the hands of Chip Kelly and Will Howard. There was a moment last night late in the second quarter where I looked and said, is Will Howard going to throw an incomplete pass? Is a ball ever going to hit the turf here? So there were some non-negotiables here. Talked about them for Notre Dame. If they allowed Ohio State to do what Penn State did on the ground, I didn't think they'd win. Well, Ohio State did it. They outrushed them 214-53. I thought that, unlike the Penn State game, if they let Ohio State get a 2-possession lead, there would be no coming back from it. That happened. There was no coming back from it. And remember the middle 8 portion of the game, which Notre Dame had dominated. Ohio State won that portion of the game 14-0. So the game tracked exactly how they needed it to. It's a miracle that Notre Dame had the thing close at the end. It's a miracle that Notre Dame had the thing competitive at the end, because Love and Price, their tailbacks, combined for 7 carries, 16 yards. To give you a basis for comparison there that I never thought I'd say, Riley Leonard, Notre Dame's quarterback, had more rushes in the first drive than their tailbacks had all game. I have no idea how that's possible, and for them to be within 1 possession late in the game. I have no idea how that's possible. Again, I have no clue how what a lot of Notre Dame did this year was possible. So it is a supreme testament to Marcus Freeman, to his staff. Just, I know it's not this, and it's disrespectful to present it this way, but I don't know any other way. It felt like bubblegumming and paper clipping your way to try and land a plane. It's amazing to watch. Absolutely amazing to watch. They forced a turnover early in the fourth quarter, did Notre Dame, and it's 31-15. And everybody collectively just looks and says, oh, wow, wait a second, I just did the math. 31-15 is a 2-possession game. They've got the ball, and there is no one who preys on turnovers more so than Notre Dame this year. Sure enough, they got it. They got a path to where they could figure it out. But the problem was we ended up being right. In fact, a lot of the feel we had on this game ended up being exactly the way it played out. Thought it would be competitive towards the end, thought Ohio State would win by, 10 or 11 or something like that. That was the actual margin. I didn't think it would be a blowout. Looked like it was going that way for a little while. But remember the number I kept throwing out there. I thought Notre Dame needed to figure out a way for 20 to win the game. They ended up with 23. That was about where they needed the game to be played. So you could look at it and you could say, oh, wow, there's the turnover. They forced it from Egbuka. Oh, wait, they went and scored. But the problem is Ohio State had 31 on the board already. So it was going to take something the likes of which you haven't really been able to do all season. Now, if you had stopped them, if you had forced some stops like Ohio State had one 1st and goal on the 9, takes them one play to get in the end zone. if you had bowed your neck a little bit inside the red zone, maybe if you had forced a couple more turnovers and you're playing the game in the upper teens, low 20s, that's when you got a shot. You weren't going to have a shot. You weren't going to have much of a shot. Notre Dame wasn't. Playing this game in the 30s, like needing 35 to win, was probably not the path for Notre Dame. But I will tell you this before I get back to Ohio State. I said this earlier today. I'll repeat it. I've been around a lot of teams. I'm around whoever's going to win the national championship every year. I'm normally around the teams that are in the championship race every year. So you've got a really good basis for comparison over a course of time for what these teams are like compared to one another. Not who would win, not would 2019 LSU beat 2020 Alabama, not anything like that, but what are they made of? When you cut them open, like what's inside those teams? In my years of doing this, in my years of being around teams at the highest level competitively, I've never been around a group of people, coaches and players, like Notre Dame this year. Cross your fingers as hard as you possibly can, and they are not as together as the dudes in that locker room and the people in that organization. I'm not just talking about the roster. I'm talking about the staff. I'm talking about the player personnel people. I'm talking about nutrition, the entire organization. I watched Marcus Freeman in his postgame press conference last night. In fact, I left the field to go into his press conference just out of curiosity of what it would be like and what he would say. And he's got Riley Leonard and Jack Kaiser to his left and right, respectively. And, I mean, they're, pouring their emotions out. They're answering questions. And there was one point where Kaiser's he's almost talking like a movie character, man. But he's real. He's being as authentic as he can. But he's almost speaking like he's reading script copy in describing what their vibe was, what their team chemistry was, like what they were made of, what the DNA and the guts of that program were this year. And Freeman's just sitting there, and you can see his eyes welling up a little bit. It has nothing to do with the fact that they just lost. It's a guy beaming with pride that the thing they've tried to build there, the thing they've tried to immerse their players in, ended up spilling out of their players. That's a huge testament. Marcus Freeman's not even 40 years old yet. Marcus Freeman's not a veteran head coach. And so I guess in some ways the validation of what you believed in being the right way to do it was on full display. And it's a supreme testament that they got this group this far in the postseason. That kind of sounds like you're taking a shot at them. I'm not. I'm just saying I don't think many other staffs out there could take this roster and go that far with it. If you're just looking at Jimmy's and Joe's, I don't think you'd go that far with it. So I cannot be effusive enough in my praise and adoration for how they went about their business all year. I counted them out several times. I know I did. You watched the show. You know I did. And yet they were still there. And they were still there because of a lot of stuff that you can't quantify and you can't put on paper. I do want to address a lot of the talk about how Ohio State put this team together. Let's see. How do I want to go about this? So we're in the whole NIL era. You got the NIL, you got the portal, you got the $20 million plus figure floating around out there. So there was a lot of talk leading up to this game, and there's been a lot of talk, especially after Ohio State won the title, of people trying to be dismissive of it. People trying to say, well, yeah, I mean, they spent $20 million on the team. Of course they won the national championship. To dismiss this accomplishment due to a dollar figure, I think is to have a lot of ignorance about how the team got put together. Now, I am not talking about the people who have a very, very good working knowledge of how this operates. I'm talking about the people. There's a large group of people out there who've been very dismissive of Ohio State winning this title because they say, oh, they just went and bought a team with $20 million. I mean, who couldn't do that? Who wouldn't be successful like that? You have no clue how the team got put together. You have no clue what that dollar figure even went to. I think it's one of the great testaments to how the future of the game probably will look, thankfully, in the way Ohio State went about this. They went and got Judkins. They went and got Caleb Downs. They didn't really go on a massive shopping spree in the portal. Now, that'd be news to most people, apparently, on the internet. They went and recruited guys out of high school. They evaluated them. They recruited them. They developed them, and they invested in them. The problem is a lot of people only pay attention to the fourth one, invest. That is not why Ohio State won a title last night. Ohio State didn't win a title last night because they spent a lot of money. It was part of it. Who did they spend the money on? They spent the money on the guys they evaluated out of high school. They recruited out of high school. They got them in-house, so they landed them. They developed them. They did a good job, so their process checked out. And those guys were good enough to have opportunities probably to go elsewhere in the portal or to go play on Sundays. And Ohio State looked and said, we got a lot of money here. We want to be all in on 2024. How should we spend it? Well, let's spend it on our guys. Let's pay them a little bit more to stay here for another year. That was the nucleus. That was the core of that roster. Now, when Saban retires unexpectedly and Caleb Downs comes available, any of you would have gone and gotten him if you could. So credit Ohio State, because you know what? Caleb Downs still had to choose to go there. You still had to have the pre-existing relationship with him to go there. They didn't land him sight unseen. Quinshon Judkins, I went up to Columbus in the spring, and I sat down with Ryan Day, and he laid out the process of landing Quinshon Judkins. And the first thing he said is, we almost tried to convince him not to come here. Not that they didn't want him, but they only wanted him on their terms. So he said, I told Judkins when I got on the phone with him, Travion Henderson's not leaving. So you're not coming here to be a feature back. You're not coming here to be the star in this backfield. And truthfully, they thought that may turn him away. It didn't. Okay, that's a process. That's a filtration process. Because you're almost looking for reasons not to take the guy because you already believe in who you have in-house. But when a guy buys into that, when you get a Quinshon Judkins on the phone and he says, I'm all in on that. I don't need to come there and be a star. I understand the concept. I'm buying into the vision you have. I just want to come and contribute. Well, then you take him. You probably never have to run Caleb Downs through that because there's not an ounce of a question that Caleb Downs could play anywhere and would fit into any culture worth a you-know-what. But that's how they went about building the roster. So if that's a crime every single one of you will be guilty of the second you can do it. But if you think it's easy, like if you think it's as simple as let's just go buy a bunch of pieces, like it's supermarket sweep, like let's push our little college football buggy through the grocery store and we want this, we want this, we want that, go try it. Find out how it feels in Tallahassee, Florida this past year. You want to go play portal roulette? You ask Lane Kiffin how it worked out. I thought Ole Miss was really good this year. But the problem was there's this intangible thing. It's like the mortar between the bricks. You know, it's not always a former 5-star player. Sometimes it's former 3 stars, guys you don't know. But there is a thing that exists in every locker room worth, again, a you-know-what, that ends up doing anything worth a you-know-what. And it's a whole lot more than just the guys. It's a whole lot more than just the pieces. It's a glue. It's a connectivity. It's the difference between individuals and a team. And it all gets born out of culture, and it all gets born out of immersing those people in something, in some cases out of high school, in some cases through the portal. But if you think it's as simple as ignoring all that and just going and buying pieces, you'll continue to fail. If your program ignores one philosophy because they think there are shortcuts to it, you'll continue to fail. The one thing this format will do, this 12-team format will do, is if you make it to the format, that'd be one thing. But inevitably, there will be enough teams out there doing it the right way that you're going to run into several of them in an effort to get to this championship game, and they will beat you. They'll beat you because they possess something you don't, and you can't manufacture it and you can't go buy it. You got to do it the old-fashioned way. No microwaves involved there. It is old-school oven mentality. I thought there was a masterclass at quarterback by both these programs. Not in the game, not only in the game. I mean, both of them played pretty well last night. Will Howard played maybe his game of the year last night. But I thought the masterclass from both of these programs at quarterback was in that they both went to the portal to get a quarterback. And yet, if you were to just sit there and listen to Riley Leonard or watch him interact with his team, or if you sat there and listen to Will Howard and watch him interact with his team, both of them with those Captain C's on their chest, you'd think they've been around there 5 or 6 years, and that's the beauty of it. These programs already go to the portal pretty sparingly. But when they went and got someone at the most important position in all of sports, they went and got someone and they didn't do what Mario had to do with Cam Ward. Mario had Miami in a much different place than these coaches had their programs in this point in time this year. Mario had to go get Cam Ward, and they had to rely on Cam Ward to be an instrumental tool in turning the program, turning the culture of that locker room around. He didn't do it single-handedly, but they needed him to be a lot more of the lift in Coral Gables than Ryan Day needed Will Howard to be in Columbus, or that Marcus Freeman needed Riley Leonard to be in South Bend. What they needed those guys to do was come in, and they needed them to be implemented in something that already works. And they did it pretty seamlessly. Not perfectly, but they did it pretty seamlessly to the point where you get to the end of the season, or even the midpoint of the season, and you can't even tell those guys are portal additions, and you can't tell that they're new. They just feel like they've always been there. That's a really beautiful thing. You know, when you have an existing product and then you add another piece to it, and before too much longer, you can't even tell where the added piece was. It just all blends together and looks like it's just one piece, one work of art. That is doing the portal the right way. Not the only way, but the right way. I used the Miami example there. Miami had to do that. Mario had to do that. These programs were at a different level, you know, in their journey to the top. They didn't have to do that. They had to go get help. They had to go get a portal quarterback, but they had to get one, and they had to get the right one. So I'm going to talk about Day a little bit more later in the show, but I thought these were two of the best coaching staffs. I thought they were the two best coaching staffs, especially head coach coordinators against each other at the end of the road. And so it made a lot of sense that they were playing against each other in the title game. Real privileged to be around both those groups, man. I thought Reese Davis with Scott Van Pelt last night did a great job of summarizing the theme of faith and how it's been woven into the journey of both of these teams to get where they were, playing for a national championship last night. I know a lot of you have a lot of thoughts about when people vocalize any kind of belief that they have, political, spiritual, on air. It makes some of you uncomfortable. Some of you love it. That's okay. I'm not here to tell you how to feel about that, because sometimes I feel strongly about it too. When I watched it, though, here's the most important part to me. We get to see aspects of these teams that the public doesn't get to see. All I want to tell you is anything that was being said on a microphone or on a stage or at a press conference by those players on those teams, both at Notre Dame and Ohio State, was 150% authentically being lived out on those campuses, in those dorm rooms, in those facilities. I know because I saw it all year. And so it got to the point at the end where the platforms get bigger, the stages get grander, the amplifier gets turned up, and the country, and in some cases the world, got exposed to it. But you got exposed to something publicly later on down the road that sort of in a more condensed fashion had been put in practice months and years ahead of time. Tip of the cap to both of them. Tip of the cap to both of them. Carried themselves first class. Phenomenal matchup last night. I mean, did we even get a whiff of like chippiness, personal foul penalties? I don't know if we even got anything like that. So it was a real pleasure, privilege to watch. And I would probably put those two programs in the face of anyone who argues that the sport is headed in a really, really bad direction. You don't have to love everything about it. But if this right here, if that matchup last night, if that's what the new format is going to bear out, if that's what the filter of the new format is going to serve to produce, then maybe the new format's not so bad after all.